Welcome to Following the Gong, a podcast for Schreyer Scholars featuring Scholar alumni bringing you mentoring on demand. My guest today, joining us here in our studio, powered by the Peter Weiler Family Endowment, is Matt Gartland, class of 2005, one of our early IST grads, and we'll get into that. Matt, thank you so much for joining us right here in Atherton Hall.
This is special, and it's awesome, and your studio is fantastic, so thanks for having me in.
Well, in the words of Andy Samberg on SNL, that's high praise coming from you, given what we're going to talk about with your career today. So I appreciate that. And I love the Penn State gear. Love when folks listen.
Yeah, trying to do my best, represent. Yeah.
Awesome. We're recording this in the tail end of football season. By the time you're watching this, football season will have wrapped up, hopefully with some trophies, but you'll know better than us based on when you're watching this. So, Matt, I always like to start off with some really relatable piece. How did you come to Penn State as a student when you were a high school senior looking at colleges?
Not in the most direct path. So sometimes that's the happy path, right, is the unexpected one. So was just really interested in the dawn of the internet and computers and all of that sort of in the, because I'm old, like the dot-com era, right? Yep. I graduated from high school in 2001. So began to just explore, of course, like, okay, what is a career? How could I really channel those interests? And the prevailing option then was computer engineering or computer science, like that sort of idea, right?
Yep.
And I did really well academically, so I was privileged to have like a lot of options. I did actually get in and seriously consider Michigan, I got to confess. My dad and his side of the family are from Michigan. I actually grew up a Wolverine fan, holy cow. So, but yeah, I had opportunities on the East Coast. So anyway, the story is that we did a big road trip, me and my family, to look at some of the universities I'd gotten into, an East Coast trip. And I'd gotten into Penn State because I'm from Pittsburgh, and most kids in my high school were like, you apply to Penn State, you get in, hopefully, right?
Yep.
And it's sort of like a good backup option.
Pretty common, Penn State, Pitt, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So long story short, though, like we're on the return leg of that trip, and I've started to whittle down the choices, but hadn't yet seen campus. So my parents were like, yeah, we're going to stop. Right, we're going to stop. We're going to see the campus. Right, you're going to get a feel for it. I'm like, nah, like probably not. There's some other good schools, like the East Coast, specifically DC. So that was likely kind of where I was leaning. But they forced me to stop, and my God, I'm glad they did. Just instantly fell in love with campus. Walked around, spent hours and hours and hours here, longer than we thought. Got home late, sort of story. So that was it. And I was like, okay, we're going to do Penn State, and never looked back.
Well, I'm glad that you stopped that day. You wouldn't be sitting here otherwise. So we've got a great conversation all about the web and marketing and startup culture. So we're going to dive into that. But first, at the time, the College of IST was brand new. You're one of the early grads of that. And Schreyer was still pretty young at the time, too. How did you end up in both of those colleges?
Two different stories. So on the IST story, another sort of happy accident, serendipitous thing where, so I had chosen Penn State, went College of Engineering, computer science, thrilled to be here, got on campus for freshman orientation, and promptly lost my SHIT that day because I just started to really realize, I think what maybe I had instinctively known, which was I wasn't going to be an engineer. Like I could do it. I was, I have that maybe ability, but in terms of like what I was really going to get the most joy out of was not that, right? So just going through that day of like, okay, this is what you're going to learn. This is what the next 4 years looks like, meeting some of the faculty, great people. It's like, yeah, but that's maybe not me. So at the end of that day, the person we sat down with, a guidance counselor of sorts, to his immense credit, I wish I remembered his name to this day to give him credit, was like, look, you're probably not built here. You should go talk to this other program. They're brand new. They're so new that they don't even have a location on campus. And they're so small that they're not even the college of blank, right? They're the school of, and that was IST. So this is like close to 5 o'clock. So like, he's like, run downtown, see if they're still there, and you should talk to them. So we booked it down there, head into whatever off-campus building it was at the time. Hello. Crickets, no one's answering. And then eventually someone walks out of the back, and it turns out to be the assistant dean at the time. So we sit down with him, gregarious, awesome guy. Convinces me on the spot that this is where I want to be, at the emerging space of where tech and internet culture and all these other things that we now think of as like e-commerce and the web and all that. So that was it. So switched my major on the spot. So that's how I got into the third class of IST, and 4 years later I was graduating number one in that class.
And obviously you graduated with honors. So how did you come to find Schreyer?
Schreyer came along, I'd say, late freshman year. I think I was sort of exposed to it. And that actually intersected with yet another storyline, which is residence life. I wanted to get involved in campus. I've always been motivated to take on like leadership positions in some way. Or just basically what that means is just you take responsibility for things. Right?
Typical Schreyer scholar.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So natural born leader, that sort of language stuff. But yeah, it was, I had a great RA my freshman year, really helped with my freshman experience in North Halls. So it's like, you know what, this feels like me. Also, my father was in residence life through his collegiate career. So maybe it's in my blood too. So it's kind of like through those two things, like the pursuit and interest of residence life, I was aware of then like honors dorms and like, okay, that could be a thing if I become an RA. Got a little more interested in the leadership kind of qualities and opportunities that the Schreyer program facilitates and provides students. And I'm a nerd, so it's just like, well, more to learn, more to do, right? And this is super cool. It's like up leveling my game.
Yep.
So was thrilled and privileged that get accepted in I think end of freshman year into sophomore year sort of thing, and then found my way after a tour of duty, as I say, in East Halls as an RA. Then made my way to Simmons and got in and was an RA in Simmons for the rest of my tenure here for undergrad.
Excellent. So right across the street, obviously, we're sitting in Atherton. You were an RA in Simmons, you said. Yeah. I like your phrase, tour of duty. And I did want to ask about that because that's a common thing that students seek out is to be an RA, right? There's a lot of benefits, a lot of work, a lot of opportunities. So what advice would you give to either aspiring or to current RAs?
Well, that you are managing a culture. And in many ways, sort of almost a culture unto yourself. Like you're part of a super group. I don't know if that term is still used, but that's what we called ourselves. Like all the RAs in Simmons, that was our super group, right? So you have that culture, right, which is really special and important. But when it comes down to like your floor, right, or your wing of students, right, you have this amazing opportunity to cultivate that culture with you, right, and not in a way that is all about you, right? But that's the nature of like servant leadership, is being able to have real deep relationships with those students, find their commonalities as well as their differences, right? And be sort of a steward of that. At all levels of the collegiate experience, I think that's important. If you're an RA for freshmen, not that one is maybe more important than the other, there's different highs and lows or challenges to it. But like for me, and this was also just a really cool thing being an honors kid and being in Simmons, is we saw the gamut of that, right? Like we had freshmen through senior there. So like my kids sort of, again, were all over the place, and it was cool to kind of be responsible, but to have that opportunity to influence, ways of relationship building among the students to elevate learning opportunities, even extracurriculars. My senior year in Simmons, some of the kids there, I want to say were also IST kids, or at least they were really interested in the web. They went on to create a tech startup company that they grew and sold for a couple $100 million. That was Weebly, which was a kind of website builder platform. And I was their RA. It was super cool. But just like, and not that I had any bearing on that success, I didn't. But just like, again, being a cultivator and a facilitator of that at such, like, at least for me, like an impressionable age, like those years are invaluable, was one of the best things that I think hopefully other RAs can just hopefully take more away, to know that you will leave an indelible imprint if you really lean into those opportunities, if you do really thoughtful programming with your students, if you're there as a resource to listen during hard times, and there's always hard times, if you build that trust with them, those skills for you will be invaluable for your career and your life, and you're going to make an impact on them too.
So Matt, you mentioned about your career, and I'm curious whether, a lot of our students, they lead student organizations. You out there, you might be on a thon committee or in a fraternity or one of the other 1,000 student organizations we have. You're an RA. We talked about this in this interview, but thinking back when you were applying for internships or jobs early in your career, what did you talk about using those on-campus experiences to help you get paid employment out in the world?
Yeah, well, I'll start with, again, the RA story. I think it is a little bit unique, especially at a campus this size. The ratio is sort of in your favor almost in a way, right? If you're an RA and being then an honors RA, that was just a unique thing. It was a way to add to sort of my differentiation, I guess, as a potential candidate for a job, right? So I played into that. And again, like the leadership side, and that's what was particularly interesting for me in terms of what I was considering and pursuing were leadership opportunities. So what I fell into, not fell into, like I pursued it, but what I ultimately was able to secure was access to a leadership development program in corporate America. So at the intersection of very much IT, given my IST education, but also like business, right? And sort of like that fusion point of like, what can IT, data science, systems, innovative product engineering, web engineering, I should say, specifically software, et cetera, meets business demands and business needs and moving business forward, right, is what I really found fascinating. And I wanted to not just like have an entry-level job. I was really hopeful to have a more elevated experience. And back then, and I think still to this day, the top Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies to really recruit top talent coming out of universities, they have these cultivated leadership programs that are structured. They invest a lot into them with, really sought after consultants and coaches, and all of these things go into these programs that are oftentimes rotational as well through different business units, and sometimes, like befell me, which was wonderful, opportunities to move around the country. So I actually moved around the country for 2 years as a part of J&J's, Johnson & Johnson's 2-year program. That's the one I got into. So yeah, telling of the story through RA was, again, sort of a unique element there. But Schreyer's at large was also awesome. Hey, I'm an honors kid. A really awesome memory that I have was going to Annapolis as a part of one of the trips that was able to be put on by the college here. And it was a leadership trip. There was all of these different kind of talks and panels and things by admirals and whatnot, right?
Yep.
My one and only time to.
We still do that program.
Do you really?
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep,
yeah, it was always
year.
vivid. Like I still viscerally remember it. It was fantastic. So those sorts of things I can talk to and like, hey, what I took away from that and my appetite and my initiative to be a part of this culture here, which again, I guess I'm being slightly repetitive, but it's about like the future leaders is how I think about what Schreyer's is kind of built to do.
Yep.
Not just in business or in technology, but in every sort of facet of life or culture or society. Politics, government, nonprofit, kind of everything. So that was very helpful for me in telling of like my genuine story and passion and the sort of difference I wanted to make, and being an applicant for some of these higher end leadership programs.
Awesome. It almost feels like your brand, like the brand guide has come to life in our conversation. I love it. So Matt, you mentioned you had this full-time gig, but I want to focus on something that's really prescient for a lot of students, which is internships. Mm-hmm. And you had the opportunity to intern at Lockheed Martin, which is obviously a name brand company. Can you talk about that experience and what you would tell current scholars to make sure that they have the most successful opportunity in whatever internship they have, whether that's here in State College or on the other side of the world?
Yeah. Well, for starters is look for internships, basics. I think
Matt Ischler can help you with that. Go check that out. Make sure you book an appointment with him if you're watching this.
The sort of intersection or even the fusion, right, of like the academic opportunities on campus with being able to, even at that stage of life and development, like begin to apply some of it like in the real world, is, I mean, you're delivering value, you're getting value back by way of like just learning how it does work out there in the real world. You start to build professional networks, to the extent that like you're lining up hopefully intentional internship opportunities that might be in a general path forward, for you in terms of what career looks like after Penn State, right? And this was very also useful for me is sort of you can potentially learn what you don't like, sort of testing certain theses, right? So Lockheed, I love aviation. Both my grandfathers served in the military. So did my father. My father flew. So I have a great respect and admiration for servicemen and women. So in general, sort of the defense sector is, I guess, interesting to me, or at least, it was and even still remains. But for a career, it's sort of a different thing. Do I want to like devote a lot of my lived reality, to that? I thought I did, and genuinely had an awesome experience, with Lockheed. Very gregarious and generous people, obviously a fantastic institution, very welcoming and generous to me as a student with scholarships and things in addition to just the internship program, actually. So I have a lot to be thankful for, from Lockheed. What it taught me in part was also that wasn't to be my path. I learned that, it was likely to become a more technical path for me in terms of career outside of just the internships, which, going back to even my entry story to Penn State, was like sort of a parallel, right? And also I kind of just had, at least for me personally, and no bias or judgment upon anyone else, it's like, do I really want to, again, commit potentially a significant amount of my career in life to the defense industry? And for me, I just reached the conclusion, actually, no, I'd prefer not to do that. But because of those experiences and whatnot else, I became that much more confident and able, I think, to tell the story of my interest, again, around leadership programs, what I wanted to get into, the sort of impact I wanted to make, to build teams, lead teams, really drive innovation for business results, but using technologies and data science to do that. And then be able to leverage the real stories and value that I had through these internship experiences to, again, sort of elevate me probably, above the pack, among others when that time came. So that's how I would stitch it together in terms of like how genuinely valuable and multifaceted, internship opportunities can be for you. And you probably don't see those opportunities immediately. You just have to kind of commit to it, and the value comes down the road.
Absolutely. Sometimes you can find your full-time gig out of it, or you can also say, hey, I don't want to do this. And that's really valuable opportunity, right?
Absolutely. So that maybe, tie the knot on the Lockheed story is I actually was given an offer. Like I went into my senior year with an offer, a full-time.
The dream, right?
Yeah, it's like, cool. Like I'm not going to coast in my senior year. That's not how I'm wired. But like just like the pressure that kind of takes off, right? I'm walking back onto campus as a senior, going to love senior year. I have this really fantastic job in the bag, right? That is itself a leadership program. It's what I thought I wanted, and largely was what I wanted, right? And sort of had the like defense sector kumbaya sort of like, or internal reckoning myself that year, and it worked out. But again, like I wouldn't have had, I think, the awareness to other opportunities out there, been able to pursue other opportunities, to have had the confidence to pursue those opportunities if I didn't have that history, the reps of those internships, the stories, and again, even like the confidence of like, I have that offer, right? So it was just, it was a big boost for me.
Absolutely. And in the previous answer, you talked about teams, and that really teed you up for your thesis, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask, tell us about your topic, because I think it was a little bit ahead of its time before COVID, right? And everything moving remotely.
A little bit before COVID.
A little bit, well, ahead of its time, right? And now it's something we take for granted almost, but you can still do it well or not do it well. And then more importantly, how have you used the findings particularly, as well as the experience of completing the project in your career?
What we're talking about is remote work.
Yep.
I wrote my honors thesis on the future of virtual teaming. Something to that effect. That's not verbatim, but virtual teaming was sort of the term back then. I'm sure I'd probably cringe if I read it, kind of like cover to cover these days. But the general curiosity was, what is happening with internet-based communications, in that era where, again, because I'm old, this is when Mark Zuckerberg was sending out, Facebook invites only to .edu email addresses, right? So I was in that era.
This is like 2004, 2005, right?
Yep. So I graduated 2005. So like I was in that era, right? Where we went from AOL IM, which probably no one listening to this is like, what the frick is that? That was AOL Instant Messenger, which was ahead of its time, really. It was one of the, almost one of the original, like, instantaneous chat-based communication platforms. It's like, this is so fascinating. Like we can start to have, instantaneous communications, globally instantaneous communications. This was before iPhone, even rolled out. iPhone was 2007, I think. So I was just curious to like, okay, then what could this do to how fast we can work, right? To sharing of information, to completing projects. And again, as an IST kid, one of the big mantras back then, and is maybe still true today, is problem-based learning. PBL was sort of like this big idea. So much of the curriculum was you're working in clusters, you're working with teams, and I gravitated into sort of the leadership quality. I ended up leading those groups, which was fascinating and fun, and just like, okay, so we're working on these things together. We're doing that in a co-located manner, but like all this global-ish, this fast, instantaneous internet-based communication, what is this going to do? right? So that was my kind of curiosity, and I tried to do as much like actual research. I remember being very little at the time, so I tried to formulate some thoughts through my thesis. So it was a fun project, honestly. And then lo and behold, what happens, and not just due to the circumstances of COVID, is it was already moving in this direction, and I think
COVID accelerated it more than
accelerated or just kind of like dunked it. It was like, okay, this is the future, smack, right, sort of thing. Because even before COVID, I'd left my corporate career to get into startups, which is maybe a conversation track we come back to.
Got several questions on that
here. Yeah, but then in that era, there's all of these new online collaboration platforms. The big one today is Slack. This was out there before even COVID happened. Microsoft has Microsoft Teams that came around after Slack as Slack got big. Salesforce acquired Slack several years ago. So I mean, this is literally like the future now. Everyone knows that now is some version of virtual teaming, which we call remote work. And it's fascinating. So I'm a part of several different startups. I don't like the term, but serial entrepreneur. They're all internet based. I have staff, whether they be employees full time or they're fractional contractors or vendors or things, all over the country. No one's really like in my office. I have a co-working office, back home, so that I can get out of the house and not go crazy. But yeah, like my business partners don't live in Columbus. My staff doesn't live in Columbus. We're across the country in all time zones, right? And the only way that works is now to these technologies, which is, I just think endlessly interesting, and there's no shortage to like what's next there. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome. And yes, thank you for joining us all the way from Columbus, which is where you live. You grew up a Wolverine fan, but you ultimately chose Penn State. So kudos there.
Right.
So the whole mishmash there. And it's so funny because most of these I end up recording virtually with a lot of the technology that you're talking about in your thesis, but then you were able to join us in person, co-locate.
Yeah. Well, it all worked out. So to kind of step out of the frame for a second, big shout out to Elizabeth Hay, who runs Launchbox, the Innovation Hub, kind enough to invite me to that program. So spoke with a lot of great entrepreneurs today. Tomorrow I'm in Omar Easy's management class on the entrepreneurial mindset. So yeah, it just all worked out. I'm on campus. Hey, let's do a lot of cool stuff. So grateful, Sean, to you for having me in.
Yep. And if you are a student who's interested in the entrepreneurial space, our friends over at Invent Penn State downtown at the Innovation Hub have tremendous different programs that you should engage with, and go do those things. If anything Matt talks about is resonating with you in the entrepreneurial space. But before you got into entrepreneurial things, you were a student marshal for the College of IST. And this is something that in December and in May and in August every year, we have Schreyer Scholars that are departmental college marshals. And I'm curious, did you ever talk about that in job interviews? Like, I was the third college marshal for IST at Penn State.
I remember doing that. I mean, back then, yes, absolutely. It was an honor. It was a privilege to be recognized in that way, truthfully. So yeah, absolutely. Highlighted that it was, a celebration, not just like me, that's weird, but just this institution, right? At all levels of it. So Schreyer, Penn State, IST, like all of it together as a cohesive whole was, tremendously special to me. And I very much sincerely played that up, talking about like a career prospect, right? With the companies I was pursuing.
And so we're going to circle back now finally to something you were talking about a little bit ago, which is that leadership development program at J&J. And obviously both Lockheed, J&J are both massively distributed organizations with a global presence. What was that experience like for you in, you're 22, 23, coming out of college? What was that like, being able to do a program like that?
It was challenging, but in the way that like I like climbing mountains, right? I mean, I've never done any serious mountains. I mean, maybe my wife will let me down the road later. But I like that challenge. One of my core motivations, I have two, is high achievement. The other is service and being like a servant leader. Those through a number of personality assessments and all those fun nerdy things, like triangulated those are the two. So yeah, a leadership development program in a high-paced, almost high stakes. I mean, these are serious corporations with, massive reach and potential. They're doing serious work. Lockheed in defense and J&J in all facets of health. You have med device. You have consumer products, maybe a little bit less serious, but med device and then pharmaceuticals, right? Being
Yep.
those are the three. So you feel that you going in, and I know that from my other friends, because you are cohorted in that way. Like we had a class, I think we had about 50 kids in that leadership development program at J&J when I joined that class. Most were domestic, several were international. So, but you want that, right? And that's sort of like what I wanted, right? I wanted, that elevated sort of opportunity to see what I could do and deliver bigger results, hopefully, for it. And a lot of it is you learn, and I learned it here as an RA, I learned it through the honors school, is that you just can't always do it yourself. You have to build, some version of partnerships, whether that's, with colleagues or you build a team, right? Being able to be collaborative around problem solving and get out of your own head, is essential. Builds trust in you and your ability to hopefully positively motivate and persuade others as well, and not just peers, but seniors, and being able to manage up. So that's another cool thing through these leadership development programs was an ability to have some level of access, right, to really senior leaders like executives at these like holy crap companies, right? Not all the time, but like, I was able to be privileged to put on some really marquee assignments, and then I'm like reporting out results or giving major updates, to the CIO. It's like, well, that might be my job in 6 years or 10 years or something. And that's the sort of fast track program, that these things are really cultivated to do, right?
Yep.
So yeah, this wasn't, again, just sort of like, cool, you're in a cubicle farm and that's your day job and like that's it. I mean, there were cubicle farms, to be clear, but yeah, I wanted that sort of like, I am pushing myself and hopefully leading others upward as well.
Awesome. So you had a pretty good gig there at J&J. Mm-hmm. Like you said, they're hopefully cultivating you to fast track up into senior management. And if you want a good conversation about J&J, go back and watch our episode when you're done with this one with Kristen Harkins, who's a senior leader at J&J. But you decided to step out. Obviously, we've talked, we're going to get into the startup part of the conversation here. Walk us through the origin story for the first company that you started and how you knew when it was time to go full in on that and leave behind the corporate life that you had at J&J.
Sure. The story would start actually a little before, the first company and leaving,
yep.
Which was because I actually didn't know. But it was just, again, the recognition and the long-held recognition that I'm an entrepreneur. I was the kid with the lemonade stand, trying to like do those things, right? Being creative, and that was me. And I was able to apply that to reasonably good effect with both academics and then eventually, the J&J career, which I think all told was, 6 to 7 years long. 2-year structured rotational program in the country, and then stayed for an additional, I think, like 4 to 5 years there before I left to get into startups. And then like even let's just recognize life itself happens, right? Mm-hmm. So, by that point, I'm mid-20s. Some of my friends are definitely married by then, and even certain ones are having kids. So I'm kind of at that interesting, just life moment, which is like, okay, I'm doing really well in this corporate career. Like, it's great. Comp is great. Future comp is excellent. I could be here, and so long as things don't make, some external factor happens, like this is probably going to, ride itself out and it's going to be awesome. Right. But is that what I want? And is that going to make me feel fulfilled at the end of the day in terms of, how I assess myself in terms of, satisfaction and fulfillment, not just in career, but the intersection of that, with life. So for me, it was like, if I'm going to really give this a shot, if I'm really going to give this a try, then I'd better do this now before I get married, before I have kids, before I make some other longer term commitment to this company, J&J, or the particular operating company I was at in Cincinnati by then. So it's like kind of now or never. And I'd been having these conversations with several of my mentors. And one stood out, Matt Broadbeck, and a window of opportunity presented itself. So create your own luck. This is real, and I would like to think almost anything sometimes. He went with a divestiture of a business unit away from our J&J operating company. Basically, it's like major league startups. So it was divested away. An insane amount of venture capital dollars came into the divested business unit. A whole new brand and model was built around that stuff, and that it was going to go off and do something. So my mentor went with that project, and he'd been my mentor. So he was like, hey, why don't I give you like a 9 to 12 month consulting gig here. You'll crush it. We need you. We'll pay you what we deserve to pay you, which is to say, well. But that's your ramp. So that's your out if you really are serious about these startup interests. And then you have on the side 9 to 12 months to figure out your own thing. That was on a Friday. I remember this very vividly when he told me that this deal was going through, the divestiture, he was going to go with it. He wants me on his team over there for 9 months or so. I walked in on Monday and I resigned. And kind of blew everyone's head apart because I was on that like CIO fast track sort of thing. So that's the story that led into the exit. I, of course, was interested in the internet, right? That's the through line through a lot of my decisions academically, IST, and everything. So my interest was not to like, I want to run a coffee shop, right? Or I want to do something brick and mortar. It was an internet-based company. Is that software? Is that, some sort of a service-based model? Is that, what is that? But, being out gave me just that much more, honestly, like mental liberty to be like, okay, now this is real. I was already studying and, the emergence of software as a service. SaaS was quite appealing as software products. So yeah, just double down, triple down on that after I made that decision. And again, happy accident. Sometimes, like, again, you need to put yourself in the right moments to have really powerful things happen to you. This was the era of the blogosphere. Everything exploded when a couple things happened in rapid succession. Matt Mullenweg builds and launches and unleashes WordPress upon the world, right? Which now powers like close to half of the internet. It's like some crazy statistic in the 40%, I want to say. Someone could fact check me on that. But like of all the websites in the entire world, like WordPress as the content management system powers like 40-something%, I want to say. It's insane. And that launched in that era, right? You had Amazon unleash Kindle Direct Publishing. So then anyone in the world, you and your brother or whomever, right, can now be an author. You can write a book, you can package it up, you can put it on KDP, you can sell it, and now you're an author, right? So this democratization of content, of storytelling, of the ability to create a brand, right? The ability to educate, solve people's problems through education online, right? To then be able to sell some version of that, products, services, et cetera, right? That is commerce. That is entrepreneurialism occurring in the cloud. So that interesting fusion of all of that was happening at the exact same time, more or less, within a 2 to 3 year period, it was all happening. And I was like, that's it. This is kind of what I've been waiting for. My interests in tech that weren't like engineering or hardware. It was communications. It was virtual teaming, right? It was my interest, and this hasn't popped up yet, in honestly content. Like all my IST friends were crazy back in school because I was electively, in addition to all of the IST classes and the business classes, I was electively taking composition literature classes. I was reading and writing a ton, and all my friends thought like I was on drugs. It's like, why are you choosing to do this much work? But it was fascinating, right? New media. I took an entire semester here on like vaudeville in the advent of like, early film, just the whole history of, media. Fascinating. I studied the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, their societies, their cultures, and so much of that is storytelling and how they tell their fables, right? And their, mythologies and all of these sorts of things. Took an entire semester on the Arthurian legend, which permeates like an ungodly number of cultures that most people won't recognize. There's even through lines all the way back to the Japanese, which is bizarre, maybe to most folks. So it's just fascinating with storytelling. And then of course what we now know and is overly almost celebrated these days is the hero's journey. The monomyth was Joseph Campbell created, really got idolized with George Lucas when he did Star Wars in the 70s. Really kind of resurrected that motif, and now it's obviously been everywhere. But I was like studying that stuff because I liked it. So that was a twist in the story, but bringing it back, it's like storytelling and content. Oh, so now we have social media going like crazy, and now we have content management systems like WordPress and KDP and a whole bunch of others, and it's all tech and it's all online. So this is it, like something there. So that was the start. And again, long journey or long wind up to it. But I started a thing, and I would even say this as advice, quite frankly. A great way to start as an entrepreneur is to do a service first. Even if you want product, if you want software, if you want to build a widget of some kind, or if you want to get into, CPG, direct to consumer CPG or something like that, consumer packaged goods. do something in service first. Cut your teeth. Deal with people. Talk to potential customers. Talk to actual customers. I think that's an invaluable opportunity to just feel the tactileness of a certain market or who you want to serve in a certain way and learn from that and evolve. So yeah, my first venture became what we would now today call a creator studio, so the creator economy. Yep. That term did not exist back in 2012, right? Blogger was the bigger term back then. That term is kind of seeing its time in the spotlight. So we were working with, because I built that firm, eventually sold it, first and foremost, authors, traditionally published authors that in that heyday were like, hey, I have a book, traditionally published, got a book deal, but I want now more creative latitude, control, and freedom to self-publish. And then from there, I want to be able to expand my business and sell other forms of content, workshops, courses, programs, downloadables, et cetera, right? Yep. So I helped figure that out. I networked my way into those channels and did everything really other than video production back then, which was great, right? And it was at the intersection of a lot of these things. Along the way, got pulled into another startup that was purely focused on direct-to-consumer e-com. This is like on Shopify, for example. Another right time, right moment, right background, right person. Was Shopify was forking its technology to create an upmarket part of its platform called Shopify Plus, working with higher-end merchants and brands, more sophisticated challenges. So agency, service-based business, grew that, sold that with the partners there. Along the way, co-created software with one of our D2C brands, Chubby Shorts, weird but awesome brand, in the returns and exchanges space, because if you buy something online, at least back in the day, freaking sucked to my shorts don't fit. I need to return it to get a different, that whole process was
last
atrocious.
mile and returns.
Yeah,
right.
Hardest
It's part of a supply chain, right?
These days, it's a little bit cute to talk about it because so much of this is improved, but reverse logistics and all this sort of lingo wasn't easy back then. So we pioneered software that made a lot of the returns and exchanges process more fluid, reduced friction, empowered the consumer more. We spun that software out of our agency into a new venture in partnership with Chubby's as our kind of founding merchant partner. That went on to raise a stupid amount of venture capital money. So it's cool. So I have a finger in SaaS, software as a service, right? So I've just been then that's been my thing. It's again, I don't like the term because it makes me sound much more important than I am, and I'm not. But a serial entrepreneur kind of operating online at this intersection of where content and commerce and tech all meet.
Absolutely. So I want to read this one verbatim just because I want to get
this
one right. So you go on your LinkedIn, Matt, there's a whole slew of startups, but they're all different roles and titles that you've been involved. Some are you're a founder, an advisor, an investor, and maybe this is straightforward and maybe I'm just clueless here. But for those of us who aren't in that space, can you define your different roles in these different ventures? What makes them different? And what kind of person or personality or skill set is best suited to each one of those?
That's a remarkably good question. Thank you.
I want to read it verbatim.
Yeah, there you go. So, if you go to my LinkedIn, it probably looks like I have 12 jobs at the same time.
Yep.
So I'm active in 12 companies. Most of those are advisor. At the day-to-day, hours, per week or something level, rather minimal, right? These are strategic relationships where I am supporting the founders or the founding team, of these tech startups. They're all tech startups. And I'm giving advice, right? In select, structured ways where it's relevant and potent to them. They really drive the agenda so that myself, and I actually do a lot of this work with my friend Pat Flynn, we are, again, surgical, to where they are in their own growth patterns and where are their growth challenges or blocks, and we try to help with strategy, tactical feedback, strategic introductions in the market, et cetera, right? So that's what advising means.
Now, is that out of the goodness of your heart, or is that an equity stake, or how does that work?
Equity stake, yeah. So compensation-wise, it's not cash almost ever. It is some version of an equity play, either as an RSU, a restricted stock unit, or as options, right, that vest over time, so that really these are chips, right? They don't pay out short term, and in the world of startups, right, you probably like write off most of your bets, right, to zero, because startups are hard and most don't survive.
But if you hit the right lottery ticket,
if you hit the right lottery ticket, it's going to be worth a good bit. I'm privileged to be an advisor to a company called Circle, Circle.so. I've known those guys from the very beginning. Remarkably talented and generous founders, have built an amazing product and company, very culture oriented, with their staff. It is a community product first and foremost to build digital community that you can monetize with memberships. You can do a lot of internal programming. It has gone gangbusters. Oprah uses it. Like, they have some major league hitters, using their software. So that is the big bet. That's probably the biggest in my little portfolio of companies I advise. But some haven't worked out already. Some have already, kind of gone by the wayside. And again, that's the world of startups. So that's what advising means. Others where I am, founder or co-founder, that means that I was there at the beginning, right? And that means that I was operational, in that company, at least, at that time, or maybe still am, right? If I still sort of have an executive role, at that company. So, that's true right now of CPG Fast Track, which is a new venture. That's a community-based accelerator program for early stage, but not beginner, so more intermediate, CPG companies that are somewhere in the neighborhood of $200K to $1 million in annual revenue. And largely, at least right now, the companies that we're serving in this sort of program are in food and beverage with a good for you product, right? So more wholesome, more natural, sort of ingredients.
Yep.
Minimal ingredients, that sort of vibe, right? So co-founder in that venture, very operational. It's early stage, we're growing it. So yeah, I guess in general, that's kind of like what it means to be a founder. It's like you're helping to take an idea, you give it shape, birth the thing, get it moving, right? Find market fit and traction, right? Really dial in who your ICP is, your ideal customer persona. Really improve upon that through cycles with copywriting, get that message tighter, more differentiated, all these good things. That's how you win. You just tighten that up over time and have more focus on the right person, and then get your offer, your pricing, all of that right over time. I, across all of that sort of stuff on the founder scale, use the term founder operator, which is it's leader, but it's not just like, oh hi, I'm the idea guy. Right, it's like, no, like I'm actually like running the thing, yep. Right? So not that this all came from, say, Penn State and my academics a little bit, but then I would say like the applied academics, and then it all kind of starts to fold on top of itself, is operations, workflow, communications, virtual teaming, building teams. It is finance, which I was good at that. I didn't major in finance, but I can do very well small business finance and extrapolated pro formas and all that. That's kind of required to understand the unit economics and patterns of a business and extrapolate cash flow and all that sort of stuff. So that's some of the specifics around how I use the term like founder operator. And then at a certain size or stage, then at least in my view, which is I guess my view, a little bit biased, and other people have a different sort of spin on it, but okay, are you the CEO? Are you something else? These other more more formal terms should be used at some point. But if it's just you or you and a partner and you're pretty early on, are you a CEO? Maybe not, right? So, I just am a little careful, at least myself, to when do I introduce that sort of a label? Am I CEO? Am I COO? Well, I probably should have a team underneath me. There should be a little more of a solidification of the business. Should be a little bit bigger.
Once you're no longer like a one-person shop.
Yeah, precisely right. Yeah, and I'm all in on one-person shops. The whole notion of, and there's different terms for this. Company of One, which is actually the title of a great book, Company of One by Paul Jarvis. Solopreneurship as a broader idea. One of my really good friends, Justin Welsh, sort of almost kind of cornered that term. He's massive on LinkedIn, really smart guy, helping others become, solopreneurs, right? With their skill, their profession, largely business. So they're, former Deloitte, something in consulting or whatever. Now they want to write a book. They want to have a private coaching or consulting practice. They maybe want to write a really authoritative industry newsletter that's free, that attracts audience, right? And then they monetize in different ways. Maybe they want to do keynotes and other things as well, blah, blah, blah. So different ways to shape up a solopreneur business. But yeah, I'm all for that.
Awesome. And speaking of titles, like CEO, right now, according to your LinkedIn, as of 2 days ago when I looked at it, you are the president of Smart Passive Income.
Got that
and
right.
You were previously the COO and CEO, according to your LinkedIn.
Yes, that's right.
So you mentioned this name before, but how did you get connected with your co-founder, Pat Flynn? Because in certain circles, that's a pretty notable name. Like, he's a big deal to certain people. How did you get connected with him?
He was a client, first and foremost. So yeah, this rewinds back to that creator studio firm that I founded myself. I didn't have a partner in that one. Way back at the dawn of all of this content proliferation, democratization stuff, right, in the 2012, 2013 era. So he had, in Pat's story, which is by itself remarkable, and I don't think I can probably do it justice myself here, but he was an architect. He had a traditional job, and loved it, and was really good at it, but lost a job in a Great Recession, like so many people did, had a lot of adversity. He had inadvertently, though, during the last, I want to say, like year or so of his tenure, created a niche website. What does it mean to be a niche website? It's a very hyper-specific topic, solving of a very addressable pain point acutely, right? And that's usually a good thing because it's very clear and people are searching maybe for that thing. And what that thing was for him was there was a very difficult exam, industry exam that he was studying for to take to pass that certification to advance his career. He did that. He organized all of his study notes for this very difficult exam on a WordPress blog, hence niche website. So when
tying it all together,
when adversity hit him and he found himself without a job, and he had a runway, I believe he had several months' notice. Like he was told this is going to happen, but you have 3 or so months. I forget the exact number. So trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I just proposed to my girlfriend. True story for him. So there's a lot of stress, anxiety. What am I going to do? And he then stumbled into learning about, hey, like this internet business online thing can be a real thing. Building up a website, trying to monetize a website is kind of how you do that, blah, blah. He's like, like I have this thing I built. I wonder if that's like getting any traffic. He hadn't like thought about it. So he goes and like puts, a Google Analytics script on it to see how much traffic he's getting. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's like a lot, like overnight, right? Because he created this thing and had cross-linked all of his blog posts because they're all his study notes. And that's, at least back then, SEO is a very different world right now. I don't think we're going to have probably time to drift into that space.
Especially now with AI and everything.
Well, yeah, that's the drift point. But anyway, so it was like, well, holy crap, here it is. So he takes a lot of his study notes that are free on the blog, packages them up into a PDF, basically the same stuff, right? But people will pay for convenience, like a takeaway point in almost any industry.
I mean, look at Pennsylvania. We have how many discussions about Sheets and Wawa, right?
Well, yes, right. So convenience is something that you can sell. So he makes it a little bit prettier, packages up into a single thing that people can read, puts it behind a little payment gateway, puts a button to buy it for $19 or whatever it was for him, and like instantly has like a multi-$100,000 a year business, like overnight, quote unquote. Of course, like overnight success, not a thing. Right, exactly. Yeah. That's the shtick with that whole phrase, right? So that's Pat. He was so profoundly grateful for what internet business and entrepreneurship had done for him that, to his immense credit, he wanted to give back. So he created Smart Passive Income because the word passive income was in its heyday back then. It maybe hasn't aged so well. But that's why he created that brand, and that website was to teach others everything that he had learned, and it was a feel-good project. It wasn't a business, right? He was making his money from that niche website, and then he replicated that model in other niches, right? So he started to do really, really well. He used that playbook himself, and then SPI was a give-back engine. Well, over time, SPI became, this could be more than that. So then along the way, he needed help on a lot of levels, strategy, production, management, etc. So introduced to me, became a client. I started helping with SPI. First was a book project because that was sort of our inroad. We did a self-published book for him. I helped edit and produce and publish the book. My team was growing. SPI was growing. And then to wrap up this part of the story, it's a big one. So sorry, got stuck on it. But we became fast friends. I became Uncle Matt to his kids. I became basically a pseudo business partner. I was privileged to do that. He just trusted me a lot. And then, all the way to, my gosh, when was it? 2018. This was after my other partners and I had already sold the direct-to-consumer e-com agency. I was like, hey, my business is doing well, so is yours. We could do better together. Different opportunities if we just go and basically make a baby company, which is what we did. So I took my company, he took SPI, and we merged it together, created a new company, kept the same name, brand equity.
Yep.
But this is then the beginnings of our big pivot into not just education, free content, paid content in the form of like courses and things, but real community and almost real academy, like a real ecosystem, a private ecosystem that you have to pay for. It's a membership, right? But it's interactive. You're meeting other students, right? We're running live programming. It's a very different thing than just like, hey, Sean, here's your access to our on-demand course for $300 and like good luck on you, and you have to stay personally motivated and hold yourself accountable to get it done. And hey, guess what? Most people don't. So we care about outcomes. We care about the journey, because we've been on these entrepreneurial journeys ourselves. So that's Pat. And that's how I came to meet Pat and become partners with Pat.
Awesome. It was funny because when I was doing the research for this episode, I had some real flashbacks to watching one of his videos on YouTube when I was first researching how to do a podcast. He's like one of the first videos that pops up on YouTube. I was like, hey, I know that name.
Yeah.
So, full circle here.
Yeah. And I realized I didn't actually maybe hit the real punchline. So the titles that you brought up, right? It's a good maybe teaching point. So like when we merged, new company, I was initially the co-founder of that new company. Yes, it had the same name, but like a very different like market thesis, and this was me even before we pulled the trigger on that deal, like seeing certain patterns in, again, what we would now call the creator economy. And a primary pattern was declining demand for one-time purchase courses, information products, which had become at that point for SPI the revenue stream, the part of the business. So it was like, hey, we can do this different. We have to change the business model. We have to do different things internally, different cost structures on the OpEx, operational expense side of things. Also, blah, blah, blah. Here's my vision. Here's how we can do this. I'll run ops, put this thing together. You can say the visionary guy. You can say keep in the CEO chair, at least initially. So that's why that happened, how that happened in the title. I then took on the CEO role to keep driving that big transformation. I forget exactly when that started. But I'm proud to say that sort of point in time has ended. I've led through that very significant change curve for us. Being the person that I am, want to be able to continue to serve in expanded ways in the market with Pat and with other partners. So it was right to do a proper succession planning process, which we started in January. It takes a long time to do these things well. Then at the start of Q4, October, officially passed the torch to my successor, who's now running the show. I'm still an owner, still in the business. I'm taking on the president role, which basically means I just help expand possibility, right? So I try to grow the pie through new forms of strategic relationships, new forms of like business deals and partnerships, but I'm not leading and running the company in that way.
Gotcha. So imagine you've had a lot of meetings, a lot of Zooms, but sometimes you want to get with folks and be co-located, to use your word, right?
Yes.
In-person meetings,
yeah,
like we have today. And sometimes those can yield unexpected wins, which is all fancy way of setting up the question, tell us how you met your wife.
I was like, where's this going? No, that's great tip. Met my wife on an airplane. So the story there is I just moved to Columbus, right? Had, taken the leap, so to speak, out of
with your Penn State flag to fly out.
That's right.
In
Very
Buckeye
much.
country.
Yeah. And I do. I don't shy away from it. So anyway, had just moved up to Columbus, starting to get more tapped into and networking in the entrepreneurial scene, just really kind of throwing myself at it. And I think that maybe that moment in time just made me more open to almost like anything. So I was on my way out West Coast, Portland specifically, Portland, Oregon, for an entrepreneurial, conference, meeting people in person. Very important then, very important now.
Yep.
Post-COVID. Yeah, saw just a lovely girl in the boarding area. It's sort of like an honest rom-com story. And it was like, yeah, like cute sort of thing, but like no way does like life like put me next to her on the plane. That happened. I was the last one to board. I was like doing some entrepreneurial thing on my computer. I travel a lot, so I'm like, I'm not phased to like get on early or whatever. I have my seat, whatever, I'll get there. So I take my time, I wrap up the thing, shut down, get on the plane, and I'm of course like, oh, I wonder where she's going to be. And sure enough, she has the window, I have the aisle. So I sit down, no one else comes on behind me, basically the last one on. So the middle seat stays open. But she immediately puts in her AirPod, or the corded version back then. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. But the drink cart comes around. She takes it out to get the drink. I help broker the drink, and that's my in. So I immediately, say something, right, to spark a conversation. It worked. We talked for the next 2 hours. We were flying I was connecting through Dallas. That was her final destination. I came to learn much later that she actually kept the other earpod in the whole time, listening to music, and never acknowledged it or took it out. But yeah, that's how we met.
Very nice. So the possibilities. Sometimes all you got to do is just strike up a conversation, whether it could be the love of your life or a mentor.
Yeah, I mean, I think the practical takeaway in different levels is like, take your shot.
Yep.
Right. And honestly, probably take more than one shot.
Oh,
you know, if my entrepreneurial story is anything, I don't swing for the fences. I'm going to talk about this in Omar's class tomorrow a little bit. And it's totally cool. Like, if that's the game you want to play that game. But in my personal lived experience, and I think there's even resonance even just with my tenure here at Penn State, is, I swing for like singles and doubles, right, to use the baseball metaphor.
Small ball.
Well, you get more reps, you learn so much faster. Like, my ability to like be tapped into res life, right, and the programs and things that we were doing and learning rapidly, right, getting real-time feedback, right, not committing too much energy or too much resources to one thing. You're learning to manage your resources, right? That's how I like to play the game, and I'm not saying it has to be everyone's version, but
play to your strengths, right?
Play to your strengths and then be able to over time compound your strengths. And I just think that faster feedback loops and shorter cycles. So the web is still the best place to, I think, do that. And to harken back to another point that I think I made, which is to possibly index on services first, at least in business, right? Especially entrepreneurial interests, is to cut your teeth on something. Put yourself out there as to perform a service in some way. And with that, that's been able for me to not have a hit on everything. I've had startup projects that quickly came up and okay, that didn't work, right? But it's like, okay, cool. Like, learn that didn't work. Hopefully, could extrapolate some valuable learning as a takeaway. Move on to the next. And like, SPI has been a hit. The DTC ecom agency was hard, but we grew that. Was able to sell that. The software venture that spun out of that hasn't finally, at least for me, delivered anything, but that's a long-term bet. The advisory stuff, same thing, right? Have a couple of those that are really going to deliver someday, and a bunch of others that won't, right?
Yep.
But that's how I think about, managing interests and really having a fulfillment, a joy to the work, and meeting a lot of amazing people and a lot of diverse interests and a lot of diverse problems they're trying to solve in different ways. It's brought me back to campus, honestly, today and tomorrow. Similar themes anyway. So to me, and what really has elevated, I think, where I'm at least in my career these days, because I'm old, again, graduated in 2005. But yeah, that's kind of my through line to a lot of this.
You talked about finding fulfillment, and whether you're a Schreyer scholar or an entrepreneur or both, you're kind of always on. So how do you turn off? How do you find work-life balance? How do you encourage our scholars to do it?
I mean, it was probably, or if not certainly, easier as a student than even the entrepreneurial life. The entrepreneurial life, even maybe I'm painting it to be very rosy, and it's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding and fulfilling. It's
highs
hard.
Are high.
It is always this. It's never just like a curve like this. That is false. That is a myth. These days, working backwards, I guess, like my kids. I have 2 little girls, 5 and 2, 5.5 and 2.5. So they're gorgeous and amazing and brilliant and just the love of our lives, my wife and me. So as much time as the 4 of us can spend together, we particularly like getting away from the city There's a region of Columbus outside of the metro area called Hocking Hills. It's nothing like, say, Colorado, but it's mountainous. You can do hikes. You can get a cabin in the woods. So we love that. That's a great way to unplug and be away from tech. I try my best not to either bring tech, or if I do bring it, okay, leave it in the bag, sort of thing. So that's a big way. In general, travel for me, I do travel a decent bit for business, but that's nice because it's getting back in person, meeting my business partners in person, expanding on partnership opportunities, just strategic ones. Yes, again, that's not fully like decompressing or being outside the business work, so to speak. But for me, there just is a like rejuvenating quality to getting back out there and moving around internationally as well. I was fortunate to get to England earlier this year, business trip, but just that sort of stuff is awesome. So travel is a big thing for me. And then I need to do a better job of this. It's harder again with kids, but I'm a voracious learner. That has waned in terms of books and other things. But I'm sort of getting to a point, at least the girls are older now, where it's like, okay, we're reclaiming more of our personal time again, which is good. So trying to invest myself back into that. One last thing I failed to mention is just health. I've been able to maintain, I did a lot of this going over to, is it White Building? Why am I forgetting this?
Yep, right next door to us here in Atherton.
Across from, over here from Atherton and across from
White
Simmons.
Building, yep.
Yeah, lived there, during especially junior and senior year. So yeah, I've been a devotee to just health and wellness practices, and working out has kept me going.
Awesome. Now, Matt, if it wasn't obvious, I dabble in content creation, but I'm definitely not an entrepreneur. I've never started a business, so there's probably things that I should have thought to ask, but just from what I do on a daily, I didn't think to ask. So what kind of questions do you often get from your mentees or interns or your colleagues or even your family and friends who may not understand what you do for a living?
A lot of
that
them
we can
still
talk
don't.
about that would be helpful for students to hear at the tail end of our chat?
Yeah, I'll bring up maybe just one, because I do think it's a big one, and maybe the centerpiece of extended thinking is it's not about the idea. So many folks that want to get into startups of any type, software, e-commerce, even something physical like a brick and mortar business. Like, I need to have like the perfect idea, and I need to spend a lot of time iterating on the idea. That's less true. You need to get something out there actually a lot faster than you think. And if it is especially an online-based startup or venture, there are so many ways now where you can test and validate or invalidate the beginnings of that idea with not a lot of resources, time, dollars, energy, longer-term commitments, right? So my encouragement is to, have an idea, give it some initial shape, keep it a lot smaller than you probably think. Maybe this can be the baby idea that grows into something much larger. Yes, like have vision, right? But don't get trapped by the possibility of all of this to come and over-engineer the idea, and then now you're 6 months down the road of this idea and you're still in the idea phase, right? And then you get overprotective of your idea because you think the idea is everything. I mean, there's so many people I've come across where it's like, oh, do I need to get like a trademark on my idea? Or when do I get lawyers involved, right? Or it's like, you don't have anything yet, man, right?
Yep.
It's like, test this.
Ideas
do
don't matter
something,
if you don't act on them, right?
Start talking about it, right? And depending on, again, what it is that you're thinking about, product or service, who that product or service is for. Not that I'm like a social media maven, because I am not. But that can be a good way to test the idea, is to just start talking about what you think and why it matters and how it can solve something in hopefully a unique way, right? There's ways you can pre-sell things, which is a great testing mechanism, and not, again, true for every sort of product or service out there. But if you're like, hey, I'm going to launch a new, group coaching program, or at least I'm thinking about it, right? So, put up a sales page. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to have your brand name figured out. I mean, you have to have something to be able to communicate value, right? And then hey, like, here's a deposit. Like, will you take the deposit? In a way that's even like a Kickstarter campaign.
Yep.
Right? Keep that thinking in mind, which is like, cool, here's the thing, right? Like, and how many people can you get to back the thing, the idea of the thing, right? So can you almost do that to yourself? So I'm elongating the point, but move a lot faster than you might think that you can or need to. Keep the idea smaller and more executable, because it's the execution and the repetition of the execution cycles that's going to fuel the momentum, the learning that fuels the momentum. Okay, I positioned it wrong. That didn't land in terms of the messaging, or this is taking way too long to build this first version of the product. That's a learning in and of itself, right? So proceed with that sort of an orientation towards small scale idea, index more on execution, get it out there, and move faster.
I mean, we didn't start with this. So.
No, but I mean that's a pretty relevant and awesome even sort of corollary, which is
$100 mic.
I mean, but like, what if you had? You're like, okay, my gosh, I have this vision for this podcast, and here's what its potential could be, right? And its meaningfulness to the college, and the whole university, blah blah blah, and like to be good at podcasting, and I'm indexing and benchmarking on Pad and all these other notable, and they're recommending. Cool. Now, you're 6 months, 8 months down the road, and you're building a budget of how I won't ask you to say, but like not small, for all the amazing gear in here. It's like, cool, man. You've just wasted, like you've taken maybe upwards of a year to get there, maybe.
Yep.
Right. Because, or maybe not, right? Because if you had gone to whomever the powers at be are over here anymore to like approve said budget with no results because you haven't done anything.
Yep.
Right. It's like, well, good luck, right? You're this is another part of the Talking Omar's class. It all weaves together, at least in my brain, which is entrepreneurs, when they don't operate that way, when they don't have the mindset for that, and therefore their habits and their actions are not born from that mindset, they artificially reduce their odds of success. You increase the opposite. You increase your odds of success by a different mindset, and then the habits and actions that are born from that different mindset. Not about the idea. Go smaller, move faster. Don't inherit someone else's version of success. Figure out your own. This is the track talk for tomorrow. But that like keep the idea of small pieces kind of essential. You've done this. You did something small. You had a $100 mic. You got some reps. Got some great people on the pod. Got it published. Got good feedback. You can now showcase the quality of your work to other people on campus. That builds trust. Trust is a good asset to have.
Yep.
Play that forward. Keep laddering up, reasonably so. And now look what you have.
Yep. Took 60-some episodes before I put in for a grant. This was all donor paid for, by the way. No tuition dollars went into
there you
this.
Go. I would bet money, though, I really would, that you would not have secured that grant if you started with that bigger vision.
Yep. Right. I don't think so either. So if that conversation, the last 5 minutes or so, really resonated, 2 things you should check out. 1, go back and find our episode with Connor Satley from our audio-only days. Some great points about kind of that iteration process that I think would really complement what, Matt, you were saying. And then an author we love here from Harvard in the college is Amy Edmondson. Check out her books, Teaming and The Right Kind of Wrong. Really good stuff on this idea of failure, fail fast, but in a productive way, and working with virtual teams. So some good resources for you to check out, talking about books and learning, right? So now, Matt, we're going to move into just kind of our lightning round here at the end with some fast-hitting questions, hopefully. What would you say is your biggest success to date? Personally, professionally, your pick.
I'd say my family, like the combination of my marriage and my kids. And I mean, they are separate things, but it's like, hey, we're a unit. So my family is the most important thing and the most empowering thing that I have in my life right now. And I think that just comes from like how I was raised and my parents, and the fortune or the fortuitous opportunities I've had as a part of different communities and different mentors and role models in my life. That's the biggest success. It has an overlay with career, which is, can you be a role model to others in your career? You don't have to be capital L leader to be like a role model. That's something that's always been motivating to me, though, is to be a role model for peers and for team and for everyone else.
So on the flip side, though, Matt, obviously we talked about kind of these lottery tickets, and not every startup's going to be a Facebook or an SPI and lucrative. So what is a failure or a mistake or a learning moment that you've had in your career? And most importantly, you alluded to this earlier, what you took from that, because even if a startup doesn't work out, you can still learn something from it.
Yeah. This is an interesting one because it's tied into a success, but at the same time, I'd say a failure, which was the sale of my direct-to-consumer e-com agency. We did sell it, That's a win. Had a lot of learnings through that, but an unfortunate failure and tragedy of that was my business partner and I had a complete falling out at the end. And too many layers to get into, at least at the end of the show here for a lightning round especially. There's a lot there. Remarkably difficult moment, honestly. The takeaway from that, in general, it's... Yeah, I struggle to maybe in a lightning round way, like distill down
Go for it.
Down to one thing. Just if you do work with people intimately as a partner in a startup venture of any shape or size for a long enough period of time, there's absolutely the possibility that you two will evolve in different ways.
It's almost like a marriage in some ways.
It very much is. I mean, the term business marriage is like used a lot, and there's a reason for that.
Yep.
Without, again, enough time and space to unpack relevant details, I would just say that like that happened, and there was, I think, an imbalanced reckoning or recognition, awareness to it happening, to the scale it was happening, and it created a lot of conflict. And then how, when significant conflict then ultimately presents, how do you handle that? And how do you handle it with, at least in my case, he was my best friend. Not just my business partner, but that also he was my best man in my wedding. And that relationship didn't survive. So very hard. So we had this success. We were able to get it out, before, something even maybe more significant transpired that would have ruined the company, right? But it's just learning that, you will yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business person, and then just as a person, you'll learn about yourself and you'll go through phases and seasons. And the people closest to you will also. And just be mindful just of what you're giving and what you're taking in relationships. It should always be an equal exchange of value to some degree. And if those things ever start to get out of touch and drift, be aware of that and address, and this is maybe the learning built into it, so thanks for the space. Resolve emerging issues earlier than you think. I think there was, looking back at it, there was clarity to things happening that maybe, at least I'll say on my side, I can't represent my former partner, that like I could see or feel it. I maybe didn't want to believe it was happening, so didn't, right? Or tried to, but not in all ways that worked. And we let that sort of continue for too long, right? So I guess I would sum that up by saying, talk a lot, be open a lot, be vulnerable a lot, especially if you're, again, in business with someone, or again, marriage or other marquee significant relationships. Find shared language. How are you sharing of that? Is there safety and space to share that stuff, as necessary? And then how do you solve conflict constructively, where it's not zero sum, right? These are really hard things to summarize in a soundbite. There are really good books out there if you want more book recommendations. Oh gosh, it's totally running out of my head. Kim Scott is the author. What's her book name? Radical Candor. Bingo. Yeah. Is a great place to maybe start. There's Crucial Conversations. Bingo. That's a second good book.
Yeah. I know that's a popular one here at the college.
Yeah. So big learning for me there.
Absolutely. And I think that's really good advice, Matt, for not just business partners, but for romantic partners, close friends, even supervisee. If you're an officer in a student organization for our current scholars, like you're a Thon captain and your committee members, like that's really good advice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially with that stuff. I never got, I was involved with Thon, but not as like a captain or anything. I had friends that did that, but I was there. Yeah. But yeah, if you're taking any of those roles, for me, like Res Life, oh my God. Like so much conflict, right?
Oh, yes.
So, and it was amazing to have developed some of those skills there. So I did have some. I just think that that's a body of work, I might say, that is never complete. Just you go through, again, different stages in your own life, own career. And then when you take on different roles and you are a different role model in different stages, how you approach conflict can evolve. I mean, there's still core tenets and core skills, but it can take on different permutations.
I do have an entrepreneurial question that kind of came out of that last discussion about selling. Mm-hmm. If I imagine if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you're getting into something because there's a problem that you want to solve. You feel passionate about whatever that thing is, that product, that niche. And at some point, somebody comes along and says, hey, I want to buy your company, merge, acquisition, all those fun terms, right? How do you go about deciding, like, I do want to sell, or no, I want to stick with this? Because once you sell once, I'm sure maybe it gets easier. I don't know, but how do
I would say
your first baby, basically, like as a startup founder?
Yeah, if I may, I'd almost like separate those into two different questions.
Please do.
They relate.
Safe to say we've gone in a productively off the rails.
Yeah, right. You'll have to bring it back here so that we don't end up like at midnight, doing the show.
Almost there.
But the front end of that question, I would say, is actually a lot harder because it's just so very personal. The question of, do you want to sell, and how do you evaluate, if there is an offer, how you would consider that almost from an emotional standpoint. The second is like, if you have made the decision to sell, how does that work? That is easier because there is more of a script to it, right? And maybe you're past certain emotional considerations, and now logically it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. How do I do this, right? There's different economic models. A common one, doesn't apply in all cases, is SDE, seller's discretionary earnings. So you're looking at your trailing 24 months of earnings, so not revenue, but profit, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And then the seller's discretionary earnings is an interesting sort of, carve out where the seller can say okay, but I'm going to add back, the term add back. Like, oh, I spent this money, but it's not actually an expense because this was more like maybe an investment or something. No, it has to pass muster. It has to be like justifiable. But, you take your earnings and then you can, as the seller, add back things to try to get earnings to a certain state, look at earnings across a certain period of time because patterns matter. And then probably a question of a multiple. So it's like, okay, here's my trailing 24 EBITDA, certain add backs. Here's then what sort of my computation of discretionary earnings is, and I'm asking for, X, 2X, it depends on what market you're in. You're selling a service firm, going to be very different than selling a software company versus, selling a CPG company. So it's what is the thing you're selling? Different industries, different models, but that's at least a decent place to start if anyone's interested.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that kind of tees up, I'm sure there was a lot of mentors that have helped you understand that, because you were a novice at some point. Now you're the expert. How do you go about finding mentors? And also, you're still really young. You keep saying you're old, but you're only in your 30s. No,
I'm 40.
Well, I'm
41.
Nobody ever claimed I was great at math.
You're kind. Thank you. I'll take it as a compliment.
So how do you advise students to approach mentorship, both as a mentor to those younger than them and behind them in their career, and mentees who, as they're just starting out their career?
Having as much clarity on what you want to get out of that relationship, as well as even what you want to give it, right? It is a relationship. It should be bi-directional. What you're going to get out of it, though, aren't answers. The best mentorship relationships that I have had, they're not giving me the answers or the secret or the shortcut, right? They're challenging me. They're asking me the right questions that I'm maybe not answering, or that I'm not asking myself, right? Have you thought about this differently? Have you reframed this problem this way? These are different things, but they overlap. Mentoring and coaching, not the same thing, very, very similar, often used interchangeably as terms. Google it, look it up, figure out where the overlaps are. There is a lot of overlap. So a really good mentor, again, won't advise you, give you answers. That's advising, that's consulting, that's saying okay, said problem, hammer, meet, nail, right? Sort of thing. That's,
I'm paying you to tell me what to do.
Right. That's not mentoring. A mentor is someone that is, okay, in this version of the story, you are the hero. In most cases in business, you should not be the hero, especially with outward marketing and copywriting and these things. Your hero is your customer. You are not the hero. Don't make that mistake. But in a mentoring
you are Excalibur to the.
Yeah, there you go. But in a mentoring relationship, you're more the hero, and we can use a literal nerdy reference, like you are Frodo, right? And your mentor is, the sage, right? He's been there, done that, been all through hell and back, right? Or, through Mordor and back, sort of thing from Lord of the Rings. So they will guide you. But the guidance, the mentorship, the wisdom is how you think in developing new modes, models, frames on how to enable yourself to solve your own problems. That's what a good mentoring relationship looks like, to be the mentee. So finding someone who has really walked that path before, which is different than saying like, oh, I need to go hire the most prestigious executive coach to be my coach/mentor because this person is a billionaire. It's like, have they walked the path that you want to walk? Right? And you're never going to find, obviously, one-to-one, but the closer you can get to that is going to matter tremendously because they know where the pitfalls are. They know the emotional journey you're about to go on. They know how good it's going to feel when you hit this moment in this sort of a business, right? They know. So they can be with you and ask you the right questions and be there for you to celebrate. That's the thing. So look for that sort of a person. And if you don't have access or you aren't aware of that sort of a person, just start networking or face off. Really.
Yep, and hopefully you'll find several of them.
Yeah.
Right? So speaking of those kind of folks, Matt, are there any professors or friends or both from your days here at University Park, perhaps some folks from Simmons Hall, that you want to give a shout out to?
Oh my gosh. I mean, Stan Stupon comes to mind from IST. Tremendously meaningful in my career there, so he definitely deserves a shout out. Oh gosh. You're putting me on the spot with names, and that's sometimes dangerous because I might flub it. My resident director, Vanessa, I'm just forgetting her last name all of a sudden, in Simmons, I remember the interview I had, to get into Simmons as an RA. I mean, that tenure there was remarkable, on a lot of the levels that we've hit on today. So a big shout out to her. I'd say like everyone in my RA supergroup, which forget if that's still a term that's used.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
I think that was like a ubiquitous term.
Let us know in the comments if that is still a term.
Yeah, I don't think we like invented it. Yeah, and it was all Simmons, and then like Atherton had their super group of RAs, all the RAs in the building, and then we had like a super group, right? It was like Atherton and Simmons together, and we had fun rivalries, of course. The two honors dorms. But yeah, Vanessa and then all of my friends over there. Danny or Dan, Todd for sure. Gosh, see, I knew this was going to happen if I'm trying to go too fast. Kristen, yeah, that group is just seared into my memory in very affectionate ways.
Awesome. Now, Matt, we're all at the very tail end of our chat here. This is your chance for a good soundbite for perhaps an Instagram reel. You can be a little social media savvy
goodness.
Here. What's the last piece of advice that you want to leave scholars with on any topic we've touched on or maybe not?
Oh gosh, that soundbite, social media worthy. You're asking the wrong person to be like pithy. My gosh,
Pithy's overrated.
It tends to be a little bit. Like it's so ephemeral. It's there and it's gone. Right on social. Just effing do it. Honestly, just like whether it's something on campus and taking an attitude of just, I can do it. I'm going to take an action. That's at least half the game, if not more. Just effing do it, which got a little bit spice obviously here at the end, but
well, it's clean enough I don't get the E on the episode.
Yeah, so. yeah. I hope not ending on like a low note with that, but we just need more, whether it's again entrepreneurs or people serving in the resident life community or in any capacity on campus. Like, take an action, just do it. Don't overthink, don't over-engineer the idea, don't. Again, all of these things, or a lot of the things that we've kind of hit on today, just freaking do it.
All right, Matt. 2 very hard-hitting questions here at the end. If a scholar is enthralled with this conversation, they want to pick your brain more, how can they reach out to you?
LinkedIn is the short answer. So,
Perfect.
I'm I'm not like prolific on LinkedIn. I'm a little more honestly like the lurker type, but I engage there. It's my channel. Matthew or Matt, I forget what my handle is, but search for Matt Gartland, you'll find me.
Perfect. And finally, I hope you had a chance to look at the menu or maybe you'll be going up there after our chat here is over. If you were a flavor of Berkey Creamery ice cream, which would you be? And as a Scholar alum, Matt, why would you be that flavor?
I didn't look. You're going to hate me. And I know they have changed so much since I was here. I was here even before the new creamery was opened. I had OG Creamery during my days. So I am honored to have had the OG creamery experience personally.
I'm just young enough to miss that.
Yeah. The one that I remember, forget the full name. It was the Paterno something.
Peachy Paterno.
Peachy Paterno. Yep.
All right. Why are you that one?
Oh, just like it's smooth, like with a little bit of sweetness, but not overpowering. Like it really delivers on sort of like, almost like this is awesome. It's not too milky. It's not too sweet. It's not then also like too savory, like a deep chocolate or something. It kind of just like hits the right note for me.
It says, I'm peach ice cream, and that's exactly what you're getting.
Yeah. There's a clarity to it. There's a it delivers for me.
It meets the value prop.
Yeah, and like you can kind of eat it year round too.
Yeah.
Like definitely works in the summer.
Oh yes.
I've always felt it was like good in the winter. I think others are a little more seasonal specific.
Yep.
So
versatile all year.
Versatility. There
Awesome.
we go. Let's end there.
Excellent. Well, Matt, I really want to say thank you for joining us here and sharing all of your insights. You watching, if you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. You know all the deal from every YouTuber you've ever seen. If you're listening on an audio app, Apple Podcast, Spotify, make sure you follow or subscribe, whatever verb they're using these days on that app of choice. And with that, Matt, I'm going to let you have the final word before we hit stop on the record.
Oh, we are
Penn State.